Good afternoon and welcome to Fort Greene, Brooklyn. And forgive me if I repeat myself from video to video because, I've made so many videos now, I forget what I said in the last video. So some of this info might just repeat itself. But my wife and I used to hang out in these neighborhoods back in the early 2010s looking for properties. So this is video number 2 on how to look for rental properties in New York City. So there's going to be 2 numbers I'm going to be looking at. First, before anything, we have to decide on what kind of neighborhood we're going to be looking in. So how I determined that was I looked at the price to rent ratio. The price to rent ratio in various neighborhoods before I narrowed it down. Okay, so if you have no idea where to look, walking into Fort Greene Park itself, very nice now, not so nice 10, 15, 20 years ago. Lovely brownstones that we also looked at, but we couldn't afford. So how we determine what kind of neighborhood to buy in. I looked at the price of the house or apartment versus the income, which is the rent per year. So if you had to buy, say, in an expensive neighborhood, like the house that I came from, which is mostly an upper middle class kind of neighborhood, white collar folks, business owning folks. You're gonna buy a single family home, detached, say just north of a mill, and that would rent for about $4 to $5 grand per month. So let's say about 50 grand per year. So that right there would tell me that this house is 20 times the rent. Okay, 20 times the rent, the price to rent ratio. And we determined that at the upper end of 20 times, you're not making any money. You're not cash flowing in any way. There is no possible way that you could cash flow, given the minimal down for a rental property, for an investment property, which is 25% down. You're putting $250,000 down plus other expenses. You're in, well over $250,000. Are you going to cash flow? Absolutely not, given the price to rent ratio of 20 times. And then we went all the way down to the bottom end, into the poorest neighborhoods, and the prices, were a lot lower. The rents were lower, but not nearly as much. So let's say you could buy a house for, 7-8 times rent. Very cheap, right? It's kind of like earnings per share. You're looking at stocks, if you do that kind of thing. I'm not encouraging you to buy stocks, obviously, because I sure as hell haven't made any money buying individual stocks. Haven't lost any money, but haven't made nearly as much as indexes, which are completely brainless. So, before we go any further, I have to say again, every video that I do on real estate investing is extremely hard. You have to educate yourself. If you don't bother. Don't bother. It's just not going to be worth it. And if you're really, really serious, you go consult a professional somewhere. This is just based purely on my 10 years of experience as a landlord, and 15 years of experience reading investment books, reading biggerpockets.com. So on the bottom end, on the lower end, low income neighborhoods, poor, very crime ridden, aside from the fact that, you could potentially cash flow because it was so cheap, right? If you could buy a place for, only half the price of my neighborhood, let's say $500,000, but it will rent for $3,000-4,000. Well, you're going to cash flow, right? I think. I haven't done those numbers in a while, but let's say it cash flows. But do you really want to like what I did? I managed myself, so that means I went down there every single week. I dealt with the tenants myself. I did everything myself. I was the handyman, you know. I did everything. So do you really want to go down there once a week and check on your property? Do you really want to go collect rent over there if you sometimes, happen sometimes to collect in cash, right? As, some people in poorer neighborhoods will, sometimes pay in cash. So we decided that the upper end of 20 times rent was not cash flowing and not profitable. And the lower end of 6, 7, 8 times rent, although you may cash flow, it's not the kind of neighborhood that I want to drive into on a weekly basis. And 2, our goal ultimately was perhaps, to move into one of these places upon retirement. So I don't want to move into a crime-ridden poor neighborhood in my retirement. So that's left with somewhere in the middle. Somewhere in the middle is a gentrifying neighborhood. A poorer neighborhood that's on the upswing, right? With nice shops opening up, nice restaurant shop opening up, lounges opening up. And we used to hang out in these. We used to eat in the restaurants, hang out in the bars, chill out at night before we went back home, en route to the house after work. We'd drop by. And we would take the trains in, see who's getting off the train, just really, really scope out the neighborhood. Are the young hippies moving in? That's a good sign of a gentrifying neighborhood. So we looked at these things and we thought that the price to rent ratio was just about right in the middle. Let's say somewhere like 10 to 15 times rent. And we determined that given that ratio, price to rent, 10 to 15 times, roughly, don't quote me, right? Roughly, and today is going to be different, and each place is going to be different, so you have to do your own numbers. You have to find what these houses rent for, these apartments rent for, and compare it to the price that you're going to pay. So we thought that, we found that somewhere between 10 and 15 times rent was a good middle spot of where the neighborhood was expensive enough where it was gentrifying and on the upswing, and it's going to cash flow, and it's not going to be so expensive as the higher income neighborhoods where you're not going to cash flow because the price of the house is just too expensive. So that narrowed it down to several neighborhoods that we looked in. We looked in Williamsburg, Bushwick, and slowly we just kept going down further south into Brooklyn as gentrification happened and as the area that we bought into got more expensive each year. And, and we kept going down to Bed-Stuy to Crown Heights. And then finally our fourth place that we bought in was East Flatbush. And and that was just about on the ass end of, on a tippy tip of gentrification. Just starting, right? Williamsburg had been going through it quite a while. We bought on the lower end of Williamsburg, and that was just starting when we bought it in 2009, 2010. So we caught that right. And next year, when another neighborhood further south, Bed-Stuy, let's say, started gentrifying, we bought there. And then we bought further south in Crown Heights. And finally, we kind of sort of preempted, I think, gentrification in East Flatbush. But, even though we wanted to hang on to them, I thought we wanted to hang on to them, and I thought I wanted to hang on to them because I needed a part-time job after retirement. I wanted one. But as it happened, we didn't keep any of them, and we just decided to sell all of them. So that's the one number, the price to rent ratio. You have to find that. You have to look into I don't know what the websites are now, but we looked at Street Easy a lot. I did, Zillow, just plugged in, what I wanted to look at. I want to look at what, 500,000, 100,000, I'm sorry, a million places, and then you put in what they rent for and you compare. For every place that we bought, I must have looked at online probably 100 places, and in person, probably 20, 30, 40, 50 places before we bought one. But, we really enjoyed it. That was our side gig, and that was our hobby. Looking at properties, going to open houses, looking at houses, looking at the architecture, looking at the neighborhood, walking through the neighborhood, as I am doing now. That was our hobby. So we really enjoyed it. You may find it to be work, so I don't know. So that's the one number. The second number we're going to look at is what is the ROI? So you've decided on a neighborhood. For example, let's say Williamsburg. And you know that within a certain few blocks, because each neighborhood can differ a lot too. One end of Williamsburg on the water, across from Manhattan, might as well be as expensive as Manhattan, so you can't look up there. The other end of Williamsburg, is on the tippy tip of gentrification, let's say, and it's going to be quite a bit cheaper. So you have to look in each specific neighborhood, and you have to look at the rents and what you're paying for, right? The price versus rent again, and how much you're putting down. You're putting down 25% at minimum, and you got to figure out how much you're going to be cash flowing per year, and that's going to determine whether or not it's going to be worth it. I didn't really figure appreciation because I can't predict appreciation. I don't think anybody can. Most people can't, right? Unless you're like a hardcore developer or something like that, where you're building, knocking down houses and building buildings on top of it, But as the mom and pop operator, I have no idea what this neighborhood is going to be a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 from now. That's anybody's guess. So I wasn't playing the appreciation game. I just figured that in the long run, just like stocks, in the long run, I'll get a certain number, right? We kind of sort of expected 3 to 4% per year from long-term holding of rental properties, just like we expect the stock market to go 8 to 10% per year in a long term, right? So that plus, if it appreciates 3-4% per year, and the property grows from a few years, and it grows from $1 million to 1.1 million. I mean, what are you going to do with that 100,000? You can't really take it out. You're not going to sell it and take it out, because once again, most of it is going to end up in taxes anyway, right? Are you gonna, take out a HELOC? I mean, that's a whole other story, right? Don't take out more loans. Don't take out more debt. It's a very dangerous game to play. I know people do the BRRR method, the buy, renovate, rent. What is it? What's the third R? I don't even know. Something repeat. You get money out of it. Right. Anyway, that's a very dangerous game to play, and you should only play that if you're like really, really good at it. We weren't up to that yet, and certainly, we were also quite conservative with money and did not want to take out any more debt, which is what that is. Oh, refi. That third R is refi. Refi, get the money out, and so you can go to the next one, which means your debt balloons over and over and over. And God forbid, you get to 10 houses, God forbid the market crashes or pandemic happens and nobody's paying, or, you're left with this huge amount of debt. All right, so we've determined where to look, what kinds of neighborhoods. Now you're looking at the second number, which is the ROI, right? So I'm going to give you an example, and I'm going to say you're not going to get this deal again. I'm only giving you the example because I know this off the top of my head, right? I did this calculation many times and still kind of sort of remember it. So the first place we bought in Williamsburg was a $300,000 one-bedroom condo. Back then there were a lot of tax-abated buildings, which means our taxes were literally like $10 a month. So irrelevant taxes. So the only two bills that we had with a mortgage and the common charges. And because it was only $300,000, we put down 25%, which was $75,000, plus some miscellaneous expenses. So let's say we're out total of $80,000 that we were out of pocket. And it would rent for anywhere between $1,600 to $1,800, and we determined that, okay, let's rent somewhere in the middle. And we always like to kind of go on the not go on the upper end of the rent scale, because, well, I gotta make sure I'm not walking into dog poop here. Jesus, seeing a lot of dog poop suddenly. So if the place could rent for 18, we would always rent for 17. I give the tenant a better deal, and it gives me the opportunity to find the pick of the litter, right? Because I'm going to have more quality tenants applying for my place. So at $1,700 per month, and our expenses, our mortgage was way below $1,000 at the time, because even investment properties, the rates were at 4 or 5. So that's roughly $400 to $500 per $100,000 borrowed. So we borrowed $225. We were below $1,000 in mortgage. The commons were about $300, and as I said, the taxes were almost non-existent because it was a tax-abated building for 15 years. So our monthly bills were in the tune of $1,300. So that means I'm cash flowing $400, right? $400 per month. Times 12, knock on wood, nothing goes wrong with a new building, right? And I don't have any other expenses, right? I shouldn't have any other expenses. All the appliances are new, the roof is new, the walls are new, etc. I should not have any issues. So $400 per month, that's $4,800, let's say $5,000 in profits in cash flow per year. Okay, if you divide 500 into 80,000, I think you got somewhere in the tune of 6%. So I was cash flowing 6%. Okay, that's a good start. That was our first place. It was just, dipping our toes into the water. And I'm looking down for dog poop. I better stop moving. So, find a clean spot. So, 6%, not a bad start, we thought. And because it's a condo, everything else was taken care of for us. I didn't have to go down there and check on it. Once I got a tenant in, I did all the showings. I picked a tenant. I ran his background. I did the TransUnion, credit check and all that stuff. Took in two months worth of the first month and a security deposit, right, to start. So now we are cash flowing $400 per month, $4,800 per year, 6% per year. Not a bad start. On top of the appreciation, which we expected to be about 3-4%, but it happened, during the early 10s. Appreciation in these neighborhoods were like 15% per year. So by the time we sold it, I think I held this place for about 5 years. By the time we sold it, it had gone up to 600 briefly, and then down to, when we sold it, it was about 550. So we made $250,000 in gains over the course of, let's say, 4 to 5 years. On top of the $5,000 per year cash flow that we were getting, our 80,000 literally, what is that? Our 80,000 literally quadrupled over the years. So if you divide 250,000 by 80,000, it's about, what is that, 3 times. That's 300%, right? 300% increase on our initial investment. That's our ROI. And then you add the $5,000, the 6% per year. You're looking at about 100% per year ROI that we got on our 80,000. You're not going to get that. That's called luck. I had no idea it was going to go up that much. Nobody knew. That's why you can't depend on it. That's why you have to depend on cash flow. That is the dependable income, because you know what the neighbor is going to rent for, you know what the apartment is going to rent for roughly, and you know what your monthly bills are going to be. So that's your income that's going to be dependable. You cannot predict and you can't depend on appreciation. And because you have no idea when you're going to sell. I had no idea when I was going to sell. You know, when we decided to sell, it was a surprise. I thought we were going to hold it on for 30 years, and I'd have an apartment down here in Williamsburg or Fort Greene and Bed-Stuy. You know, I'd pass down to my kids because they love the city, especially now that we have kids, and they know, and we know that it. You know, we all love the city. We all love the city. You know, we all wish we could have an apartment here, but you know, and my kid goes to school right here in Fort Greene, Brooklyn Tech. So that's why I'm here picking her up today. As a favor, twice a week I pick her up because she has an extra course. She takes an extra college course on top of all her APs. So she has to stay late today at the local library and just do a 2-hour online course with a professor. So that's what I'm doing here today. I'm trying to pick her up twice a week. So yeah, we would have loved to have kept one of these places. You don't know what's going to happen. You think you're going to hold it for 30 years. Lots of things happen in 30 years. And you know what? You could be forced to sell in 5 years, and you know, the appreciation could be nothing. You know, neighborhood could be completely flat for 5-10 years and then suddenly shoot up. You know, and as an example, you know, my example, it went to 600 very briefly and then went back down to 550 when we sold. And today it's roughly still at 600 after all these years, right? It's 2024, so now it's 14 years later. 10 years, roughly 10 years after I sold, and it's barely budged above 600,000. And what do you think it rents for? When I sold back in the late teens, let's say 2015 or 16, mid-teens, that place was 550 and we were renting for $2,400 a month. $2,400 a month, and my bills were $1,300, remember? I was cash flowing $1,100 per month. So that last year, I made a lot, right? 11,000, that's about 1,100, that's about $12,000 per year in cash flow on $80,000 worth of investment. That's a huge cash flow. You're not going to get that, okay? Because you can't predict that these prices are going to go up like, you know, crazy like that, double digits per year. You can't predict that. Today, if you were to buy it, you know, oh, you know, Johnny got a great deal. He got decently wealthy on real estate. I'm going to go out and buy real estate. Today, you buy for 600. It still probably rents for about 2,400. Are you cash flowing? You do the math. You're not cash flowing. And, you know, is it going to, you know, appreciate as fast as it did the first 5 years? It hasn't. It hasn't appreciated much in the last 10. You know, and I'm not going to expect that it's going to appreciate that much because it's already been gentrified. The area is already in the, you know, in the upper middle class range already. So it's now been gentrified. It's a decent neighborhood now. It's not going to suddenly shoot up into like a, you know, a millionaire's neighborhood, like an Upper East Side billionaire's neighborhood, suddenly, right? So just because I bought it doesn't mean you're going to buy the same thing and expect that you're going to make the same amount of money. It's not. And again, I'm giving you this as a warning and really to discourage you from just going out there and buying any piece of property and thinking that you're going to get rich or you're going to make money. You're not. And chances are you're not. You have to run your numbers. You have to do your research. You have to do your due diligence and do all the research that I did, you know, boots on the ground, you know, hang out in these places, verifying online, you know, the rent numbers versus the price numbers and, you know, versus what you're putting down. So what you're going to get, your ROI out of this. You have to determine all these numbers to make sure that those numbers are worth it. Okay, so this is going to wrap up video number 2. Oh my God, it's 24 minutes. Longer than I thought. Video number 2 on how to look for rental properties in New York City. I hope that helps. This is going to be a continuing series because I can literally stand here and talk to you for hours on any of these, you know, micro topics that I just passed over, like, you know, tenant screening, you know, how to look for, you know, all these little areas that are involved with looking for a place and renting it out and keeping it and managing it. I can literally talk to you for hours on any of those topics, but let's end it here and I'll see you on the next video. All right. Cutting out from Fort Greene Park in Fort Greene, Brooklyn. See ya.